Real Estate Pro Talk with your host, Greg Ernie, connecting people, community and property.
Well, hello and welcome back. Greg Ernie here. Welcome to our fourth and final episode of our Real Estate Pro Talk, focusing on the changes to the Residential Tenancy Act. I'm joined again, and welcome back, Tracy Russell. Welcome back, Tracy. And today on our final part that we're going to focus on is selling a property that is tenanted. There's been some big changes in that, or big changes coming in around that space. So first of all, the question that landlords do want to know is, can I sell my property if it is tenanted?
Yes, an owner can sell a property if it is tenanted, but there are requirements now. So if a property is on the market for lease and an owner has the intention to sell the property, or even if the property is on the market, then it has to be disclosed to the renter prior to them signing a rental agreement. It's very rare you'll have a property on the market for sale and rent at the same time, but it has happened. Yep. So it can affect you actually renting a property, because I know for me, I wouldn't want to be moving into a property knowing it's on the market for sale. Yep. But if an owner is thinking that maybe 3 months into the tenancy that they'd like to sell the property, they need to disclose that to the renter before they sign the agreement.
Right. And probably just on that, because quite often we might have a property that's for sale and it's for rent. And if the landlord is thinking, oh, well, if I can't sell it and I rent it, then I'll take it off the market, that's okay. But in essence, really, something would need to be given to advise the tenant whether the property is either going to be kept for sale,
exactly,
whether it's going to go back on the market at some point in time, or whether, no, it's off the market now and we won't be putting it on the market for at least the term of your lease. Is that right? Yeah.
And if I was a renter, I'd want that in writing.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think it's just about clear communication to the renter so they know exactly what's happening with that property.
And probably a question that comes to mind, we rent a property, just per normal, it wasn't on the market for sale, it was just advertised for rent. We rent a property, and I'm not sure if you're coming to this or not, but the tenant's been in there 3 months, the landlord's circumstances has now changed, and they need to sell. Can they do that?
They can do that. So if there was, clearly they weren't thinking of selling the property, and situations do change. No one, I think, could have anticipated what we've gone through in the last 12 months. Yep. So, you know, who knows where we're going to be in 12 months' time. Yep. So things do change.
So circumstances change.
And an owner now decides they need to sell the property. Yep. So there's a new requirement the new requirement is that an owner has to give a tenant a notice of intention to sell the property 14 days prior to the owner wanting to sell. Right. So before it goes on the market. So
which normally that would happen anyway. Generally, by the time normally an owner will probably get a market appraisal. By the time you then do that, and then you then get photos and you get everything all sort of up and going, probably takes a couple of weeks.
But there's a time frame.
Yes.
And they're now writing that into the Act. Okay. So with the 14 day, and it will be a form that the Director of Consumer Affairs of Victoria will be producing. It has to be on that form, and it has to be given to a tenant 14 days prior. So that's a new requirement.
Right, interesting. And so landlord's putting the property for sale. I'm the agent selling it. So can I go and take photos? Can I do it? We do a lot of video now. What's the go when the property's tenanted?
So I'm just going to go back a step. So prior to having the photos and videos, you've done your step is the 14-day notice of intention to sell. Yep. Then to actually go in and do a sales appraisal, you need to give a minimum of 7 days notice to a tenant now to go in and actually appraise the home.
And is that after the 14 days, or can that be?
Good question. Good question.
Stumped you on that one, haven't I?
I would assume the 14 days, and then after the 14 days, you could then go in and do your appraisal, as long as you've given your minimum of 7 days notice. Sure. But I'll look into that, Greg.
All right. Anyway, I'm sure we'll like all these things. We're still learning and they're all new. But the point is, you've got to at least give 7 days notice for the appraisal, whether that's within the 14 or whatever, who knows.
Exactly,
We'll
and it's also a minimum 7 days to be able to go and do photos or videos.
Okay.
So the interesting thing around photos and videos now is a tenant can object. So they can object, and I'm just going to refer to my notes here. If there's anything in the photo that identifies or reveals sensitive information about the renter.
Yep.
So if they have any valuable items that could increase the risk of theft.
Yep.
Or may identify the person that's residing at the property who is at the risk of family violence or personal violence.
Yep.
So if that is the case, they can actually object to having photos taken.
Sure. Yep.
So...
And what about and we do this now anyway, but like when we take photos of bedrooms, we'll blur out, if quite often children's bedrooms have like the child's name up on the wall or something like that, or there might be a family portrait in the lounge room, and quite often we'll blur those images a little bit, or we'll blur the name. Is that something that would be acceptable, or at the end of the day, if a tenant's got concerns, then they can just prevent a landlord from being able to, or preventing a sales agent to be able to get the photos taken?
Yeah, so it's all about communicating. So I think when it comes to selling a property that is tenanted, it's important to go out and sit down with them and go through the process and talk to them about, you know, removing any family photos they're not comfortable with. A tenant can actually request to see those photos and the video before it's used online.
And I think that's fair enough at the end of the day.
So.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I know we do that now anyway, as far as meeting the tenant and talking through the process, and you know, it's really important from our point of view that they're comfortable.
Yes.
So, you know, really, once again, like a lot of these changes, Tracy, we've gone through in this series, you know, actually a lot of the changes, while they might seem daunting, they're actually more just common sense.
Exactly.
And not as bad. Can a tenant actually object to the property going for sale?
They can't object for the property going on the market, but they can object to having the marketing done on the property if they can prove some of those items that I just suggested.
Sure. Okay. And so, that's, once again, that's something we would, as the you know, sales agent, we would work our way through.
Work with them, not against them.
Communicate with the tenant and so forth. So, and how much notice... So we're on the market, so we've given all the notice, the 14 days and the 7 days you're talking about. How much notice... So let's say we're now, the board's up, we're on the internet. How much notice do I need to give a tenant to be able to take a buyer through?
Okay, so the new requirement is 48 hours. It has to be a notice of entry in writing, and it needs to say it's to take a prospective buyer through. So currently it's 24 hours, so that's changing to 48 hours.
And I think probably I'm going to just chip in on that. So currently it's 24 hours notice in writing. But I know in the discussions I've always had with tenants, generally I've always found the majority of tenants to be really good to work with. And you know, quite often the tenants go, Greg, if you just call and if it suits us and we've had plenty of notice and it works, we're fine for you to come through. Now, that doesn't mean a tenant has to do it that way.
No.
But I've always found, provided you treat the tenant with respect and you communicate, come back to that word again, communication.
Communicate.
That most tenants, and I guess at the end of the day, if a tenant does want to be a stickler with the rules, and that's fine, that's their right to do so. 48 hours notice, we can give it in writing that we want to bring a buyer through at 3:30 on a Thursday afternoon, and we're right to then go through.
Exactly. So that you can hand deliver that notice, and as long as it's between 8 p.m. and 6 p.m. and not on a public holiday, then that is totally fine.
Yep.
So. But of course, if you're working with a tenant and by mutual agreement...
And that's the word mutual agreement. Rather than we give notice, we're coming through at this time, whether it suits it or not, I'd prefer to just general conversation.
Yep.
And once again, I've never had an issue with that. So
exactly.
How often, though, can I take a buyer through?
Okay, so now, again, by mutual agreement, you can take as many as you like.
Yep.
But... If a tenant wants to stick to the rules and what's in the Act, you can only do two a week for a maximum of 1 hour. So you can't, if you take someone in the morning and someone in the afternoon, That's your 2 inspections.
Right.
They're 2 separate inspections.
Okay, so that's a bit of a change than what it's been. We've been able to conduct inspections and have it, obviously if the tenant was comfortable, we could do an open for inspection and so forth, and then, but we might do private inspections and sort of generally that way. Now what you're saying, 2 inspection times of 1 hour each.
Up to 1 hour.
Up to 1 hour each, and that's it. Unless, of course, the tenant agrees, coming back
Again,
to communication. If the,
yes.
But, sometimes, and I don't say this to say that tenants can be difficult, because the majority aren't. But if a tenant does want to stick to the rules, then they can. Then in essence, they can demand 48 hours, of which we can serve the 48 hours and come through at the time that suits us, or not.
Well, you can, but again, if the tenant is subject to family violence or personal violence,
yes,
they can actually request certain days and times.
And that makes sense. Yes.
So,
yep.
so it will depend on an individual circumstance.
Yep.
And again, by mutual agreement,
communication.
do what you want.
Yes.
But if you've got a tenant who's not comfortable with the property going on the market, they are going to stick to the rules, it's important for an agent to understand they can only do 2 inspections
for 1 hour
per week
1 hour each.
for up to 1 hour.
Yep.
So you can't, if you go, well, we're coming at 12 o'clock one day and bringing someone through, you're better off just advertise it as an open at 12 o'clock.
Yes.
Up to that.
Yep.
1 hour.
So a little bit of a change there.
Yes.
And anyway, look, that like all these things, it's just something we'll work through. And I just keep coming back to, we've said it a number of times, communication.
Communicate.
Solves all the problems.
Exactly.
All the problems. Is the tenant entitled to compensation?
Yes, they are. So that's another big change. So now, some owners would offer a tenant compensation just for the inconvenience of having the property on the market. But now, every inspection, they need to be compensated. So it's $30 per inspection, or half day's rent, depending what is the greater. So I've worked out at $4.20 per week, that is $60 per day in rent. So if your tenant is paying $4.20 per week or under, then it's $30 per inspection.
Yep.
So if you've got 2 in a week, then they're entitled to $60 reduction.
Yep.
Anything over $4.20 is going to be higher than the $30 per inspection.
That's your half day's rent.
That's your half day's rent.
Well, that's a new one.
It is.
And look, once again, I know quite often when I've sold property, a lot of the landlords have said, look, Greg, reduce the tenant's rent by X amount or whatever. We want to do the right thing. They've been great tenants. So it's, but once again, it is just something there. And I think the big change is probably the 2 inspections per week. That's where, once again, if the communication's there, generally I've found tenants will work in and it'll be fine. But at the end of the day, the rule there is the 2 inspection. That's probably the big change. Anything else there, Tracy, that...
I'm sure there is, Greg, but for now, I think they're the main changes that I can see.
Trace, excellent information. That concludes our fourth, or our episode 4 of our series on the changes to the Residential Tenancies Act. I just want to say, for any landlords, any tenants, certainly we'll be making this information available to all of our landlords. It'll be getting sent out. Tenants, if you're wanting any of the information, will also be available for you as well. It is the changes. If we don't manage your property and you're an existing or you're a landlord out in our local marketplace, and if you want any information, please contact any of our team. We do. I think with all of this, we're still getting our head around it. There's a lot to take in. As I just sit here, Tracy, as we've filmed these over the last couple of days, the changes that are coming in and the administrative work that I know you and your team are now faced with, it is enormous. It's big changes, but I do think once we get on top of it, it'll be okay.
It'll be okay.
But at the end of the day, it can seem daunting, and certainly we're available for any of our landlords or tenants if you've got any questions on the changes. So, Tracy, thanks for joining us. I know when I came up with this idea last week, as you've been trying to get your head around all of this, you're like, really, Greg? But I really appreciate it. I think our landlords certainly will appreciate this information because the changes are big and communication, as we said, is the key. So,
totally. No, it's been my pleasure, Greg, and I'm sure to owners out there, it'll be okay. You know, it's not as bad as what the media have made it.
Yes.
And I think it's just, yeah, as you said before, a lot of it is common sense. But we stay calm and we carry on.
Carry on. I love it. Tracy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Greg.
For Real Estate Pro Talk.
My pleasure.
We'll hopefully see you back again soon. And maybe next time you can be joining us again in 6 or however many months and just saying how good the changes have been, and we're well on top of it, and it's running smoothly, and all landlords' nerves will be put at ease. So thanks,
Excellent.
Tracy.
Thanks, Greg.
Good on you.
Thank you.